friends, I'm glad you're here. Yesterday we left off on James and the Giant Peach. Spider was spinning beds so that one person, and the insects would have a nice place to sleep while inside the stone of the peach. Today, it made me think of something that I have here at my house that a student, when I taught at Lemon Avenue, brought to me because she knew that I love nature. She found it out, I believe, in El Cajon, somewhere out east. And it is, let's see if you can figure out what it is. Maybe some of you know. Maybe some of you have seen this in your own yard. I never have in my yard. So let me put that up towards the camera. Look at the top. And look inside. Can you see inside? Okay. If you guessed that this is a trapdoor spider's burrow, you're right. This is the burrow of a California trapdoor spider. And what I would like you to do is kind of imagine that the ground spreads out all around this burrow. The California trapdoor spider has jaws that enable it to bite away and create a burrow in the ground. And then it somehow manages to create a little trap door. Let me shake it. Let's see if I can open it. Oh, it's a little bit stuck. Let me tap it a little bit. There it is. That is where the trapdoor spider lives. So imagine a little cricket or a little ant is walking along the ground, and the trapdoor spider will feel the vibrations. And then poop, out he'll pop. He quickly grabs the prey and takes it back into his burrow. So that's a native California, Southern California spider. I don't know if they have them in England, but they have them in other parts of the world. I thought you would enjoy seeing that. All right, let's go ahead and see what happens in this next part of James and the Giant Peach. A few minutes later, Miss Spider had made the first bed. It was hanging from the ceiling, suspended by a rope of threads at either end, so it actually looked more like a hammock than a bed. But it was a magnificent affair, and the stuff it was made of shimmered like silk in the pale light. "I do hope you'll find it comfortable," Miss Spider said to the old green grasshopper. "I made it as soft and silky as I possibly could. I spun it with gossamer. That's a much better quality thread than the one that I used for my own web." She must think very highly of Grasshopper if she'd use a higher quality for him. "Ah, thank you so much, my dear lady," the old green grasshopper said, climbing into his hammock. "This is just what I needed. Good night, everyone. Good night." Then Miss Spider spun the next hammock, and Ladybug got in. After that, she spun a long one for Centipede and an even longer one for Earthworm. "And how do you like your bed?" she said to James when it came to his turn. "Hard or soft?" What would you choose? Let's see if you chose the same as James. "I like it soft, thank you very much," James answered. "For goodness sakes, stop staring around the room and get on with my boots," the centipede said. Oh boy, he still hasn't taken off his boots. Do you remember how many boots he thought he had? And how many boots he really has? I think it was 42 he really has, and 100 he thinks he has. "You and I are never going to get any sleep at this rate. And kindly line them up neatly in pairs as you take them off. Don't just throw them over your shoulder." James worked away frantically on the centipede's boots. Each one had laces that had to be untied and loosened before it could be pulled off. And to make matters worse, all the laces were tied up in the most complicated knots that had to be unpicked with fingernails. It was just awful. It took about 2 hours. And by the time James had pulled off the last boot and had lined them all in a row on the floor, how many pairs altogether? 42. What plus what equals 42? 20 plus 20 equals 40, and 1 plus 1 is 2. So if you said 21 pairs, you're right. The centipede was fast asleep. "Wake up, Centipede," whispered James, giving him a gentle dig in the stomach. "It's time for bed." "Thank you, my dear child," the centipede said, opening his eyes. Then he got down off the sofa and ambled across the room and crawled into his hammock. James got into his own hammock, and oh, how soft and comfortable it was compared with the hard, bare boards that his aunts had always made him sleep upon at home. Poor James. "Lights out," said Centipede drowsily. Nothing happened. "Turn out the light," he called, raising his voice. James glanced around the room, wondering which of the others he might be talking to, but they were all asleep. The old green grasshopper was snoring loudly through his nose. The ladybug was making whistling sounds as she breathed, and the earthworm was coiled up like a spring at one end of his hammock. Maybe he didn't need that long hammock after all. Wheezing and blowing through his open mouth. As for Miss Spider, she had made a lovely web for herself across one corner of the room, and James could see her crouching right in the very center of it, mumbling softly in her dreams. "I said turn out the light," shouted Centipede angrily. "Are you talking to me?" James asked. "Of course I'm not talking to you, you goofball," the Centipede answered. "That crazy glowworm has gone to sleep with her light on." For the first time since entering the room, James glanced up at the ceiling, and there he saw a most extraordinary sight. Something that looked like a gigantic fly without wings. It was at least 3 feet long, was standing upside down on its 6 legs in the middle of the ceiling, and the tail end of this creature seemed to be literally on fire. A brilliant greenish light, as bright as the brightest electric bulb, was shining out of its tail and lighting up the whole room. "Is that a glowworm?" asked James, staring at the light. "It doesn't look like a worm of any sort to me." "Of course it's a glowworm," the Centipede answered. "At least that's what she calls herself, although actually you're quite right. She isn't really a worm at all. Glowworms are never worms. They are simply lady fireflies without wings. Wake up, you lazy beast!" But the glowworm didn't stir. So the Centipede reached out of his hammock and picked up one of his boots from the floor. "Put out that wretched light!" he shouted, hurling the boot up at the ceiling. That might work. The glowworm slowly opened one eye and stared at the Centipede. "There's no need to be rude," she said coldly. "All in good time." "Come on, come on, come on!" shouted the Centipede, "or I'll put it out for you." "Oh, hello, James," the glowworm said, looking down and giving James a little wave and a smile. "I didn't see you come in. Welcome, my dear boy, welcome, and good night." Then click, out went the light. Here is Quentin Blake's illustration of the glowworm. Kind of hard to see. Oh, there she is. That's a little better. She looks happy. And here's James on his hammock. James Henry Trotter lay there in the darkness with his eyes wide open, listening to the strange sleeping noises that the creatures were making all about him, and wondering all around him, and wondering what on earth was going to happen to him in the morning. Already he was beginning to like his new friends very much. They were not nearly as terrible as they looked. In fact, they weren't really terrible at all. They seemed extremely kind and helpful in spite of all the shouting and arguing that went on between them. "Good night, old green grasshopper," he whispered. "Good night, ladybug. Good night, Miss Spider." But before he could go through them all, he had fallen fast asleep. Chapter 14. "We're off!" someone was shouting. "We're off at last!" What do you think they mean? They're off. James woke up with a jump and looked about him. The creatures were all out of their hammocks and moving excitedly about the room. Suddenly the floor gave a great heave as though an earthquake were taking place. "Here we go!" shouted the old green grasshopper, hopping up and down with excitement. "Hold on tight!" "What's happening?" cried James, leaping out of his hammock. "What is going on?" The ladybug, who was obviously a kind and gentle creature, came over to him and stood behind him. "In case you don't know," she said, I can read ahead with my eyes before I read it aloud to you, and the way that she phrases this just made me chuckle. "We are about to depart forever from the top of this ghastly hill that we've all been living on for so long. We're about to roll away inside this great, big, beautiful peach to the land to a land of what?" asked James. "Never mind," said the ladybug, "but nothing could be worse than this desolate hill's top and those 2 repulsive aunts of yours." "Hear, hear," they all shouted. "Hear, hear." "You may not have noticed it," the ladybug went on, "but the whole garden, even before it reaches the steep edge of the hill, happens to be on a very steep slope. And therefore, the only thing that has been stopping this peach from rolling away right from the beginning is a thick stem attaching it to the tree. Break the stem, and off we go. Watch it, cried Miss Spider as the room gave another violent lurch. Here we go! Not quite, not quite! At this moment, continued the ladybug, our centipede, who has a pair of jaws as sharp as razors, is up there on top of the peach, nibbling away at that stem. In fact, he must be nearly through it, as you can tell from the way we're lurching about. A lurch is like a boom, a sudden movement. Would you like me to take you under my wing so you won't fall when we start rolling? That's very kind of you, said James, but I think I'll be all right. Just then the centipede stuck his grinning face through a hole in the ceiling and shouted, I'm done! We're off! We're off! The others cried. We're off! The journey begins, shouted Centipede. And who knows where it will end, muttered the earthworm. If you have anything to do with it, it can only mean trouble. Nonsense, said the ladybug. We are now about to visit the most marvelous places and see the most wonderful things. Isn't that so, Centipede? There is no knowing what we shall see, cried the centipede. And here the centipede has a little song or a poem. I'll read it as a poem. We may see a creature with 49 heads who lives in the desolate snow, and whenever he catches a cold which he dreads, he has 49 noses to blow. Ooh, I can visualize that creature living in the snow with 49 noses. We may see the venomous pink-spotted scrunch who can chew up a man with one bite. It likes to eat 5 of them roasted for lunch and 18 for its supper at night. Well, hopefully they won't encounter a venomous pink-spotted scrunch. We may see a dragon and nobody knows that we won't see a unicorn there. We may see a terrible monster with toes growing out of the tufts of his hair. So he has toes up here. Ooh. We may see the sweet little bitty bright hen, so playful, so kind, and well-bred. And such beautiful eggs, you just boil them and then they explode and blow off your head. Now, this little section of the poem reminds me of a Shel Silverstein poem. A new rhinoceros, surely you'll see, and that 'normous and norrible gnat, whose sting when it stings you goes in at the knee and comes out through the top of your hat. Ouch! We may even get lost and be frozen by frost. We may die in an earthquake or tremor, or nastier still, we may be tossed into the horns of a furious dilemma. But who cares? Let us go from this horrible hill. Let us roll, let us bowl, let us plunge. Let us go rolling and bowling and spinning until we are away from Spiker and Sponge. Remember Spiker and Sponge? We haven't heard about them in a little while. I wonder where they are. 1 second later, slowly, insidiously, almost gently, the great peach started to lean forward and steal into motion. The whole room began to tilt over, and all the furniture went sliding across the floor and crashed against a far wall. So did James and the ladybug and the old green grasshopper and Miss Spider and the earthworm, also the centipede, who had just come slithering quickly down the wall. He had been outside busily chewing away at the stem so that they could break free. Okay, I have a question for you. What creatures do you think James and his friends will see on their adventures? And they do see some interesting and unusual creatures. Think about the creatures that Centipede talked about. The monster that had the toes growing out of his head. Or the, what was another good one? Oh, that's right, the creature with 49 heads and 49 noses. So I guess he didn't have 49 noses. He didn't have 49 noses on one head, on 49 heads. Think about a crazy creature they could find and draw it for me. Label it or write about. You could write about its habitat, just like Roald Dahl talked about that creature with 49 heads living in the desolate snow. What is the habitat of your creature? If you do a little writing in addition to your illustration, that shows that you're going above and beyond. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Bye-bye.